Alrighty, happy Sunday, everybody. I was going to do a live stream tonight, but I decided we should probably do a bit of a layout update, and then I'm going to show you some of the processes that I've been going through because I need to do some work on the back side of the layout, so I figured that would be a good time to video it. But before we get started, let's kind of talk about some of the things that I have gotten done so far. I've been painting on a lot of the layout just to kind of get an idea of what this is going to look like, and some of it I'm leaving alone for the time being, but I got a little paint down in the yard, so this is nice and gray now, and I got a few more excavators for the quarry here. This will probably be one of the last areas that I do, so this is kind of going to be how it is for a while now. I got a hillside put up back over there and kind of painted, and a house kind of in position. I'm also still kind of waiting over here because I want to get that granary and see kind of how it fits before I do any sort of scenery. But the kind of major update that I got done is I got a bunch of painting and rock work done. And so I've kind of got two different ways that I do rock work, and I was experimenting with both of them. This is kind of the drag method, gives you more of a chipped away, like this was carved specifically for, the trains to come through this hillside. I've done a little bit of painting on this. I'm relatively happy with the way this looks. I'm going to come in with, I'm probably going to use grout unless it really warms up in Montana in the next week or so. I doubt that. Normally I could just use dirt from outside, but it's currently winter in Montana, so that's really not going to be a thing. So I think I'm probably going to have to buy some grout and mix it up to get kind of a nice flavor of dirt. And then I will kind of come in, lay in dirt through this to kind of give it a hillside look, and then add a little bit of turf. And then the rock throwing, the rock showing through on the high sides here should give this kind of a nice carved out look. And I went ahead and kind of painted through this entire area. And so far, I think it is starting to look pretty decent. I still need to do a bunch of work here. I need to drill the hole for the water feature to come up. I'll probably do that in the next week or so, get the pump installed. And I'm hopefully going to run the tube a little bit long up through here, and then I can kind of pump it into a reservoir just to make sure everything works. I'll then come through and probably do some scenery in here, add some dirt, some rocks, that type of thing, make it look like an actual riverbed. And then I will probably come through and epoxy it at that point, seal that all in so it's nice and waterproof. And then I could probably start seeing if I can get the water feature to work. So that is in the next couple weeks, and I promise I'll video when we get to that point. But the other thing that I've did is a little more foam cutting over here. I kind of evened up the hillside a little bit so it looks more like a hillside. I made a kind of a gravel wash right there, which will be one of the later things that I do. But the other thing that I really got done is I came in here and did the hack and slash method for some really heavy looking rock over here. The process I use for this is I always do a really dark under, like a base coat, and then I wash gray, and I'll come in and do some highlights with white later. But this needs a couple more coats of gray to really get that granity rock look. So it has a nice effect when you do it properly, and I will also come in a little bit with dirt here and there to kind of make it look like it's been that way for a period of time. But today, we need to work on the back side of the layout. I need to go ahead and put in my tunnel. And to get started, I printed these right here. I found these on Thingiverse. A gentleman offered them up. They are for O scale, I think. And I just did some custom scaling to make them fit kind of where I wanted them to go. These are by no means N scale. Matter of fact, they're probably, if you did the conversion, the bricks for them are probably absolutely massive. But I 3D printed these, and unfortunately I don't have any black filament right now, so I printed them in white. I came through and I did a base layer of black, and it didn't get into all the cracks, but that's all right. What I did is I sprayed everything black so it looked like, you know, the top of it has lots of diesel smoke or steam smoke, depending on, you know, soot, I guess in that case, if that's what you're doing. But in my case, diesel smoke. And then I came in with a little bit of brown paint, did kind of the edges here. And after I got the brown paint installed, I came back with a black wash to try to get as much of the, you know, the cracks to have a nice dark color to them, just to kind of differentiate. I wanted to get as much of the white covered as I possibly could, because under video lighting, whites really show out. So you can still kind of see some there in the D, but that'll be all right. Once I did that and I had let that dry thoroughly, I came back in with some of the pastels. I forget what they're called. They're kind of like a... There we go. I'll just grab it. Essentially makeup for men. Come in there, hit it with some dark browns and what have you, and all of a sudden you got yourself a nice brick look. Kind of fade in the brown into the diesel smoke a little bit. And then I came in, all said and done, with another wash of the black. I wiped it up and then let it dry and hit it with that clear at that point. So we're going to get those installed, just glued in place today, as well as a little bit of maybe some of the backside foam work done. And then once they're installed, that'll allow me to do some measuring so I can go ahead and start putting in cutting the foam at the proper lengths, heights, and what have you to put in the tunnel back there. So I'm going to get the layout pulled out, and then we're going to start doing some foam work back there. Don't mind the stained old coffee cup here, but first thing I want to do before we start digging into this is I got the layout pulled away from my back wall here, and you can see all my storage back over here. Don't mind that. But one of the things that I have been slowly working on is this is a layout designed for taking video on. And one of the things I ran into on my old layout is trying to find a good place to put a tripod. And what ends up happening is the way that I do my video, I like to get really nice and low to the trains to give them a more realistic look. And so what I devised was I found one of these adjustable tripods. I put a 1/4-20 bolt on it, and I kind of use the phone as a tripod. And this works in a lot of situations. The problem is this is always touching my scenery, and the more times you do this, you end up beating up your scenery, breaking out some stuff, clipping the trees, that type of thing. And so what generally ends up happening, and I found this with my old layout, is there's a couple really good spots that you find good angles that you like to use regularly. And instead of trying to find a place to put a tripod, I devised these little things. Now I just put together a kind of a CAD file on Fusion 360 and made these. They got little fins on them that kind of help lock them in, as well as a couple ridges for glue to kind of fill into. And right there we have a slightly oversized 1/4-inch hole. Now, I was struggling with my 3D printer. Something's not quite right. I built these to be pretty darn accurate, and my inside diameter ended up being wrong, so I ended up increasing it to like 109% for my print dimension, and everything works pretty good at that point. What it allows me to do is just take that 1/4-20 bolt, and it slides right in there, and it acts as a tripod mount. So I've been slowly putting these all over my layout in spots that I have found that I like the angles of things, and one of those spots is right about here. And so you get your phone installed in a position that you want, and I kind of just pop down into the foam. That gives me the position. I line it up with this, and we're just going to go ahead and cut that out. I just take a good sharp X-Acto knife and kind of cut a circle here. And if you have a pair of tweezers, it will become apparent that they are the easiest way to get this out. You could also drill this out. However, I just don't have a drill bit that fits it real well. Not to mention, it seems like I get a lot of nasty foam everywhere, but not going to be a problem today because we're making a mess anyway. Let me just stand up here. Alrighty, we got the hole pretty well augered out. We'll just kind of test fit this. And this is where you'll want to take the phone and kind of straighten it up, make sure everything fits properly. And we're right next to the track, so that's kind of what I'm looking for. And I will just come in with Elmer's glue and get that set in there. You also want it slightly recessed because we're going to come in here and do landscape over top of it. I put together these plugs. I haven't printed any yet that can go over top of this. I think what I'm going to do is print them in 2 pieces. I will do kind of a flat piece with a little nipple on it that'll kind of slot into this. And then I will print a cap that's kind of triangular with a hole running down the center that I can super glue on top of that cap, in which case I can just stick a tree in it, kind of make a bit of dirt and foliage to go at the bottom, and then you can kind of pull the tree out, put it back in to hide that if it's in a scene where you can see it. But I have been trying this, and they've been working really good, and it's a super simple way. These are really cheap adapters. I think they're like $6 or $7, and that's just a modified 1/4-20 grade 8 bolt. Grade 5 would be just fine. And all of a sudden you have a really solid tripod. So that is the first thing I wanted to do over here, because I've been noticing this is a good place to put together scenes. I do at some point need to come back here, and I need to do a little bit of soldering. I've got a couple of spots that have some problem areas that not necessarily derailing, but a couple of my engines that run a little lower to the ground are catching on a couple of these lips. So I want to get these smoothed out nice and flat, and I'll solder them. Again, try not to solder all of your connections, mainly because you're going to have some expansion, contraction. But the other thing that I want to bring up is after you used your track for quite a bit of time, you can start to figure out problem child areas where you're starting to get black spots. And I'm not totally sure the science behind this, but I believe it's called micropitting. And you can find areas that you can potentially have issues where there are micropitting spots. And one of those areas is right here. And after doing a little bit of looking, trying to figure out, there's actually a dip in the rail right here. So what's happening is as the trains come across this, the wheels will lose contact momentarily because it's dipping down on one side and not the other. So you start to get little black spots right there for the moment that wheel kind of leaves, and you get a little micro arc of electricity. So don't clean your track for the first little while. These black spots can help identify problem areas as you're going along. And so what I'm going to do is I will probably come in here and solder this connection, make sure it's nice and flush, and then I'm going to just carefully lift this up a little bit, use a straight edge to make sure it's nice and level, and then I will come in after we're kind of done here with some Elmer's glue that'll just kind of flow down underneath there. I could do it with hot glue as well, and then just let it set. And so problem area identified just from a couple weeks worth of use. You get lots of black coming off that. So that's a good way to find problem areas, is to look for where you're getting the black soot. So the backside here, before we start working right down here, this is where the tunnel's going to be. And what I am running into is I can't use full-size foam to run across the top to make the upper area. For example, here's where you can see it. These are almost as tall as 2 full pieces of foam. However, I need the top of the tunnel to be roughly this height, so I'm going to have to cut up a piece of foam. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure this thickness, and then I'm going to build a jig for cutting a piece of foam. So what I'm going to do is initially set it up for the exact width of this particular thing. I'm going to cut a piece of 1.5 inch foam the entire length. Probably in this case, I'll probably just do roughly a 3-foot long chunk to get a nice straight piece. And then I'm going to take what I've done in the past. It actually works pretty good. Is if you stack dominoes, the old wooden ones, to roughly the right thickness, which you can usually get pretty close. You set your foam cutter down on top of it, and I just use the wire one, and push the foam through it slowly, and now you've got a nice thickness piece of foam. So that's what I'm going to do there. And then down here, I'm only going to need, once I've got that measurement and that kind of installed on these, I can measure this distance right here. And for what I'm doing back here, I'm going to have the backer board up against it. I can paint the area down here black. You're really not going to see much in here. And I want to be able to, when I pull the backer board off, I could do maintenance down in here really easy. So all I'm going to do is say this is set up right down here, I'm going to have 2 or 3 inches of foam on each side to kind of help strengthen it. And then it'll just be open space behind it, and then the top board right here. And then that board will be glued and supported against this piece of foam right here. So getting these installed, what I ran into is the tallest piece of rolling stock was actually what I reviewed this Friday. They're those double-decker auto racks, and they're the tallest piece of rolling stock I currently have. And I think they're even a little bit taller than, say, a double-stack container, a well car. And so I don't think I'm going to have much taller than that. Even if I do, if it's talking scale-wise, they're going to be minutely taller. So if I wanted these to stay relatively scale, I was struggling to get the leg length correct. And so what I did, instead of messing with the scale of these and trying to get them just a little bit taller, I printed off some adapters. And what I did, I should have paused the video. Everybody got to see my fat guy that's there. I put together, and don't mind the dog hair, I live in a house of 3 dogs and 2 cats, and it's the middle of winter, so we got static cling, something terrible around here. But what I got is this little thing right here, and that right there is a bugger to model. I don't know why. This actually wasn't bad, but I built one that was double-sided, kind of like so, to go over there as a walkway, and it was a bugger to model. I don't know why, but Fusion 360 just did not like it, and I was struggling. But I measured the edge of the Kato Unitrack, and this just kind of perfectly butts up against it. And what I did is I built one for the inside and the outside, and this one is way longer than it needs to be, but it will allow me to trim it to the very edge of the rail here, wherever I need it. And what this did is this brings up the scenery to the exact level of the rail. And what that allows me to do is then take my archway, and it starts at the exact level of the rail, giving me that extra little bit of height that I needed to make this work properly. And so that was kind of, think of it as a base stone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue those in place like I've done over here, and then I am going to come in and put my archway where it needs to be. Now, I also built these archways to be just a little wider than they should be. They're going to be buried in the side of the foam just a little bit to kind of hold them in place, make them a little bit stronger. It's also going to make it a little easier to do scenery work when we come in here to paint the back and that type of stuff, to make sure this is all not easily seen in video, because white really shows up. So I am going to get this one glued over here and cut into the scenery, and then we will be right back and we'll start some work right here. Alrighty, so I got that tunnel portal glued in with some hot glue and drying. I got this one installed. We're a little bit off of level, so I kind of tried to make some fudges where I could. And then I will start doing the tunnel, the top here, sometime in the next week or two I probably need to get the backer board installed just so I can get some good measurements. Maybe I just want to put this in here and cut everything to fit. I'll kind of have to decide how I want to do that. But for now, I want to do some work over here. Now, I originally, when I put this together, I thought this was going to be more of a hillside. After deciding that I want to maintain a lot more of the top space on this for a runway, this right here is going to turn into more of a cliff side. And so I've been, like I showed over there, I've been working that rock face around, and this I want to maintain as a hillside. So really this is all pretty good right here. I'm not gonna have to do a whole lot to it. So this will probably just get painted. I'll do it brown, and then I'll kind of come in and splash some green where I want some foliage. And the reason why I'm doing this way, if you didn't watch my last video, is I am ballasting my track before I do any of my turf work. So I kind of want a good indication of what this is going to look like. Plus, while, I mean, this is weeks, months of work that I'm working on now, nobody wants to look at pink foam for that much time. So slowly kind of making the paint just so you kind of get a visual idea of what's going on. Also, when you start doing, you put down your dirt base and then come in with some turf or trees or whatever. Should you miss something, get kind of a thin area, this pink will show right through. This brown blends in pretty good, so it's really not that big a deal if you miss a little bit. So, a couple of things you'll need for doing this style. I showed in one of, maybe I didn't. I might have scrapped that video, but the side here where I did the more scooped away, like it was actually cut into kind of a hillside for the trainway, that you take kind of a dull like butter knife and you scrape the foam and it just kind of peels away. In this case, we're actually going to be cutting it away to give it a more of an angular rock-like look. And so the difference is you still do a little bit of that here and there, but you have to use a really sharp razor knife to get it to function. And so instead of buying new X-Acto knives, I actually just prefer using spare hardware knives. These you can buy in bulk a bunch cheaper than X-Acto knives. You would be surprised how fast foam will dull one of these. A little bit of foam work and you're going to find it's going to start dragging and catching and not work quite as well. But the other thing you might need is you can use an X-Acto knife, a little bit of leverage for popping stuff out. I've mentioned this tool a couple times on my channel. This is a watchmaking tool, and it is for popping those little removable pins out of your watch. When I'm not painting and whatnot, I wear a watch, and I work as a parts guy, and we move a lot of things that can grab on your wrists and whatnot. So I like to wear watches that I lost the word for it. The strap can break away, and this helps get those pins back installed. So the little hook tool on this just works awesome for this, and I'll show you as I start to cut in here. But what we're going to do is, as we kind of come around here, we're just going to make cuts randomly. And you'll find that it works better if you change hands because you're going to get slightly different angles. Once you got some cuts in the foam, go ahead and just start making some actual slices into those cuts. And right here we have kind of a beat up section of foam. This is where I come in here and just start popping out some of those chunks. Again, try to be random on how you scoop these things out. trying to make it look like I'm not doing anything special, but I am trying to do something special. And this is like right here where it would start to interchange. This is where I would maybe kind of do a little bit of the scraping method. Now, you can do this with a butter knife, or you can carefully just kind of scrape kind of as flat as you can hold it. I use it as a transition instead of the entirety of the... All right. Be careful. You can use your finger to kind of scrape away the little pieces that are, you know, getting in the way. You can really heat your hand up quick if you're rubbing on it, and it will burn you. There's something about that foam. I don't know what it is, but it creates a lot of friction. You're going to make a huge mess, so have a vacuum prepared. Okay, so I came through and cut most of this out. This is kind of what we're looking like for now. I kind of left some washes right here. I thought that would be kind of a nice little addition. Got a nice, you know, cut in through here. I worked with the foam separating right here to kind of make a bit of a reason for that. There's actually going to be a big crack there. Kind of work all of my foam problems into the scenery. I worked the rest of this around here to kind of my hillside area. So now what's next? Besides, there is the other tunnel portal right there. It is time to come in and start painting this area. So I'm going to set up the tripod right here. I'm going to show you kind of what I do here and right down here. Alrighty, sorry about the funny camera angle here, but I'm struggling with space and I also kind of got to work around it, but I got a pretty simple setup for how I do this. You paint your base layer dark black, so every layer that you put on after that, should you miss, you know, painting somewhere, that acts as kind of a deep, you know, shadowed area. This is something that I learned from painting miniatures years ago, and it really does add a nice effect. The other thing about working with foam is the foam can be kind of brittle and easy to break off. Painting will kind of get some of these small pieces to break away. The other thing is if you layer multiple layers of paint on it, you tend to get kind of a crusty outer texture that is more resistant to breaking than just the regular foam itself. After we glue and add scenery and turf and all that type of stuff, it really does make a pretty strong, cohesive, pretty robust layout that you can beat on a little bit without worrying too much about breaking pieces of foam away. So to start with, let me see, here's my new one, just straight up black. This is the 50-cent Walmart stuff, and I just put a big old blob somewhere where I don't care. And then I have an old measuring cup, marriage advice, don't use your wife's good measuring cups. Just get a little bit of water on the brush, and essentially what we're doing is we're just starting up top and dabbing the paint into the areas. Do not have to be exact or anything like that. You are just trying to get it into every nook and cranny. And this paint can be a little bit thick. That's perfect. We're just doing the upper area to start with. And as we want to work down, just dab your brush in the water and kind of let the paint flow down. You're probably going to have to do multiple coats of this anyway, so it's not a big deal if you miss anything. The hardest part about doing rock work is getting all of the nooks and crannies painted. So it looks like I'm having a stroke. It is kind of the technique you're going for. Especially and when you break up the foam, you'll kind of see it. There's some fuzzier areas. You have exposed some of the foam cells to the paint, and they can be they can absorb more paint than some of the smooth cut areas. So you will notice that there are certain parts of the foam that you're gonna have to paint more. Like right here, I don't know if you can see it on camera, but where there's cuts and kind of the fuzzier foam, this didn't take a layer of paint like the other areas. So this is going to take multiple coats. But in a couple minutes there, we got paint on here, and it's a pretty quick process. The worst part is this is kind of a hurry up and wait situation. You're going to paint the entire area, wait a couple hours for it to fully dry, and then come back in. So I'm going to do this, and then we're going to talk about painting this brown down here. Basically the same technique, but I will be right back. Alrighty, so I got the paint drying on the upper half. Down here, this is all going to be hillside. I realize we got some steep areas here, but don't much care. Some of the steeper stuff is going to be a little more brown. The less steep stuff is going to be covered in grass. So we'll come in here, we'll do a base coat of brown on most everything, and then maybe clean some of it up with a little bit of the green. But any dark brown will really work. Dark chocolate from Walmart is kind of the jam for me. I like it the best. I'm about out of it, so I might have to fill in with something else. It looks poo brown when you start, but I promise when it dries, it's more this darker brown over here. But in this case, because we're doing a large area, I kind of like to just use a foam brush. It makes it pretty quick for just getting the job done. If you don't want the brush pattern in there, you can kind of come in and do this technique after, and it will pretty well clean up the entirety of the brush strokes. However, for getting stuff done quick, it is a great way to do so. This is all going to get covered with dirt and whatnot, so I'm not too worried about the actual brush strokes in it. However, I do want to come in with a paintbrush and clean up around the rails. I just do not want any pink showing through on the layout. Again, cracking the foam. This is actually where I buried one of my feeder wires. I might come in and fill it with some hot glue at some point. I might just work with it as a crack in the ground too. You don't have to get perfect around the rails because the ballast is actually going to spill out quite a bit. So this is one of those funny things. I get a decent amount of comments on my videos, but honestly, I get a whole bunch of emails, and I don't know if it's because some people are scared to comment and don't want because honestly, sometimes it is, I wouldn't call them dumb questions, but questions that are more focused on people that are just beginning. And so I get a lot of emails because I have my email posted on my account. And one of the emails I got said, "Are you crazy? Why are you leaving blue tape on your layout?" I have done a few layouts at this point, and the blue tape, when you glue over top of it and whatnot, you don't really have to worry about it peeling up. It ends up becoming a pretty much permanent part of the layout, and it actually paints pretty well. And once you get a good layer of paint on it as well as some scenery, you'll never see it there. There are some certain places, like on hillsides, you want to try to hide it. But if you got problem areas where you're trying to get foam to stay together, just glue them, throw down some blue painter's tape, and it'll hold it together. If you don't feel like pulling it up, you can paint right over it. It's really not a big deal. But I do find it funny that a lot of people, and I get 2 or 3 emails a day with just questions, which isn't a problem. I don't mind answering them by any means. But it's funny that people would rather email me than comment and ask a question. But not a big deal, just something that I find kind of funny that a lot of people just choose to email instead of comment on my videos. Alrighty, everybody, that's pretty well put together for the time being. I'm going to have to let this dry a little bit before we do any more work on painting. But thanks for stopping by. I appreciate you watching this. Hopefully some of it might have been informative. I just kind of wanted to put something out. And next week we are doing the review for the RSD 15s from Broadway. I've had pretty decent luck with them, and I've got a lot of comments, so we will we'll look at those in depth next Sunday. And this Monday I will be putting out a Railside chat. Hit 1,000 subscribers, so I wanted to go over kind of what I got planned and say a quick thank you to the community. So I will see you this Monday for that, and have a good rest of your weekend. Bye now.